Law and Economics Lecture 2, What is Rationality? Are People Rational? By Professor Haque Enamul Haque.
Good. So now you realize by this time that rationality is a much larger concept. And economists are pretty clever. They decided not to debate on the moral issue. They decided not to debate on the legal issues. They decided not to debate on ethical issues. They said, no, we all want to deal with a human being who are rational. That's how we start economics. We said we start with economics rationality. And one of our targets that if people are rational, remember the question if people are rational, then probably we can find a strategy of resource efficiency, welfare maximization. Remember, all this issue enters with the assumption that people are rational. So give me an example of an irrational person so far. So what you realize, most of the examples that we've given are all rational. So where is the example of an irrational person?
Like one thing that I would actually call irrational is actually committing suicide. Like for example, ending your life, even if you feel like you're going through a lot of different scenarios in life and you're facing a lot of hardships, but yeah, and you just want to be done with it, but still it doesn't give you the like in every ground. Take us for example, like self-interest grounds, ethical grounds.
Very good example. If I smoke, remember smoking is injurious to health. So if I smoke, which is similar to like committing a suicide, not today, but over a long time, I'm reducing my number of years of life. So if I was supposed to live for 90 years, I will live for 70 years. So I lost 20 years by smoking. Rational or irrational?
Sir, I want to say on behalf of John's, like he said that committing suicide is irrational, but I don't think so, because we have to. He's saying it by his perception, or I also agree with him that it's a worst decision you ever make. But we have to think about that person's perception. His or her mental state is in not that condition that he or she could think that like the mental state or the depression level was so high that they think that this is the best decision for them. So this is irrational for them.
So you think there is a utility from death?
They feel like, sir. That's why I'm saying it.
So good. So until that time of his or her life, he was thinking life is beautiful. Was it a rational decision?
Sir, I didn't get you.
At a point in time, I decided that I should commit suicide. Right? You think that is the time, that's the lowest point of my life. I have decided to commit suicide because that's the best way to get rid of my pain and unhappiness. So your life, no life means I'm dead. That gives you a satisfaction. But until that time, before that happens, he or she may be thinking completely that I have to live much longer life. Right? So was that a rational decision? Because now you are saying dying is a rational decision. I get your point, Razia. Now, John.
Yes, sir.
What do you think? She's thinking it's rational behavior.
Sir, one contradiction that I would like to bring here is that the example you gave, for example, smoking. Smoking declines your lifespan. We all know that. It's injurious to health. However, it does not kill you at a very instant. You still have something after that, right? So you can make more decisions after a certain period. However, my point exactly was, for example, like committing suicide. There is no end after that. Like that is the complete end. You don't get to make any more decisions after that. So from my perspective, I would say that is something irrational.
Yes.
Sir, what if that person who is committing suicide, he actually don't want to make any other decision? Like he don't want to make any other decision. That's why he's taking this final decision.
How many times in your life you changed your decision?
I don't think we can change our decision. That's why it's called decision. If it's taken, then it's taken.
We never change our decision?
Yeah, everything is not our like our advising rule. We can do airdrop for our
So
advising course, but life,
airdrop is a good decision.
yes,
So you decided to take this course,
yes,
and by tomorrow you decided forget about this course. It's a confusing
exactly,
course. I don't want to take it. So you can realize that
yeah,
this is the choice that you have is because your life is there. In other words, there is a possibility of changing your decision, but when you die, commit a suicide, that choices you are erasing, right?
yes,
You
sir,
realize you realize that you are erasing a choice that would have been there because
yes,
you have,
sir,
for someone you may say, okay, this is the end of my life, I have to do it. It happens to many people, particularly
yes,
between in your early life, not after 20s. But in your early life, it happens on a lot of issues. Often people, children get annoyed with their parents, and that's very common. And a lot of time you believe this is the end of my life. Uh, Answer is and that is why you have to understand, if you commit an irreversible act, most of the act in your life is reversible. The only act that probably is irreversible is your death. The rest of the thing you can reverse. You get married and get rid of it. You may be unhappy, but you can be happy with someone else. There are many things you can change, but the thing, and that is why death is probably one of the most irrational acts. And yet that is one of the reasons why you see, even on religious, when it comes to ethical issues, every religion spoken against it. Every religion has spoken against it and said, no, that's not something you should, because it's an irreversible act. So irreversibility as an issue. But on the other hand, we change our decision quite a lot. And the ability to keep that option open is rationality. So remember the logic that I'm pushing in, that if I die because of unhappiness, I leave an option closed, which means I cannot re-decide anymore. And a lot of people will say that is an irrational behavior because you are removing the choice of making another choice. It is the end of your choice making. And people say, no, rational, and that is why you find out almost every religion, doesn't matter which religion we belong to, has been talking about death and committing suicide. They said, no, that is not a choice. They said, oh, no, this choice is not yours. This choice should not be taken by you. Remember, this way religion, morality has been formed, they were very careful that, okay, how do I create these choices? And how do I tell this is not a choice? So every religion spoken against committing suicide. And the reason is very simple, because you actually reduce your option. And on many cases, people were unhappy and people would say, look, I become happy after that. So a point that we are raising, that that committing suicide is a clear irrational behavior because you are not going to come back. That's it. That's the end of the story. At that point of time, and since life is not one point of time, multiple point of time, rationality has to be creating that, leaving that option open. Okay, so think about making a choice. And So think about, this is a choice for a product, X1, and this is a choice for another product, X2. So we have two choices to make, and we said we need to define what we call a rational individual. So if you want to define a rational individual, how do we define a rational individual? And if you go back to economics 101, we define with a definition called basket. So we said, if I have this basket, X1, 0, and if I have X2, 0, these are the basket I have, that is, I am at this point. This is my point. If I'm at this particular point, then what is rational for me? So how do you rationality, create rationality? So economists were clever to create the definitions for it. They said, if I have a basket A, and if I have a basket B, and if in the basket A, at least one of them is bigger, it is a better choice. So they talk about choices means if I can show, and this is, remember, when they talk about this, they talk about at one period of time. At this moment, we're not talking about today versus tomorrow. They're saying at this moment, if I'm given a higher amount of commodity, this much, for example, if this is the point B, this is the point A, and if this is the point B, then I would always go for A because A has something more, but this is not in two different time periods. So remember the choices. So that is why you'll find out these are all issues that we economists have discussed. They said, first of all, is rationality a static concept or a dynamic? Should we make a choice based on only today, or should we make a choice based on future? And since there is a future, so there is I would say there is a definition of static rationality, and there is another definition, and that's a more complex one, is a dynamic rationality. Means, can we, so for example, I voted for a political party this year, maybe next year I will vote against it. So realize that I am actually choosing something that I rejected before. Answer is, between this time, many things have changed. So a lot of time we confuse the rationality discussion with choices, and choices between today and tomorrow. So let's talk about the first choice, which is the choice of today, means a given time. And we're saying anytime we have a higher amount of goods and services, obviously we will choose more. So in other words, if you think about it, this is a better point than this, because at this point I have X, this much product. At this point I have this one same, but this one has increased. Because this one has increased, obviously this is a better point. So if I'm talking about rational individual should always go for A rather than B, because A has more of a product, right? Question is, do I have ability to understand this? So it's not a rationality as an issue of you think about rationality just a concept, but it's also, to me, it's also an ability to judge. And that is why you find out in economics, we said, okay, in order to be a rational individual, person should have ability to compare. If I don't have ability to compare, that means I am actually irrational. So if I take a decision, whatever decision I take it today, do I have a good ability to compare it? If I don't have ability to compare it, a lot of time we compare it with the past, but we forget that there is a life in the future. And a lot of people do not see the future the way they see it. So a lot of people will say, the way I look into the life, I would say, no, I don't see the future the way I want it, no. So I thought that, no, for me, the best thing is to commit a suicide or do something that I think this is the best solution. So I'm giving you the logic of, in a way, we talk about economics in rationality, we say the person has at least ability to compare. So simple comparison is one of the key conditions. Ability to compare is a key condition of rationality. Now I may compare situation consequence. So I'm a doctor. I'm comparing, if I don't go and join my work, I will be sacked. And if I have ability on the consequence of what is the consequence on me about sacking or on my family, then I say, okay, maybe I should go there. I don't like it, but the consequence is heavier. If I don't go there, I will have a much more difficulty in life. In other words, my family will suffer. So I'm giving you the logic of building rationality. In other words, ability to compare is a very important requirement for a rational individual. And a lot of time, if you are not able to compare, people will say, okay, that person is still not rational. And in psychology, they would say that it takes up to 22, 25 years for individual brain to simulate this logic. So that's why you find out that the more you aged you are, your behavior completely changes because you have a different logic. So there was a research done on human brain a few years ago, and they looked into the human brain and they said, can human brain able to compare things properly? And they said it requires up to 20 to 25 years for a full logic of comparison, and that comparison requires time. So I'm giving you the point that for you to think about it and said, okay, here is the one criteria of rationality. I can be only rational if I have ability to compare. So whenever we say, are you rational? Our first question should be, is that person able to compare situations? So for example, a doctor decided not to go to job or quit a job because he has ability to compare, and he thought that if I go to the job, I will die. And if I die, my family will suffer. But if I quit the job, I have other ability, I can survive. So he compared things. As long as he compared this thing and decided, he has taken a good decision. Another scenario probably is that the doctor who decided to go to work, for him, he also compared. He compared that, okay, I have a scenario, I can go to the job, there's a possibility I will be dead, but there are all the rules and regulations. But if I don't go there, my children will never get educated. So I better take that risk and go. You realize how people are taking risk. And in this COVID scenario, you can realize how behavior is, people are moving, comparing a lot of things. And that ability to compare is one of the primary requirement of rational individual. So even though textbook talk about, in economics textbook, we talk about mathematical equation, but I'm giving you that it is not always the mathematical equation. It's an idea that, okay, can he compare? Now, comparison between two things and comparison between three things are not same. So there is a simple comparison ability, which is between two things. And there's a complex comparison between many things. Can I go back and remain consistent? What is remain consistent? I decided that this is a bad thing, but then if I given two choices, three choices, I go back. I said, I'm not sure, which means I have not been able to develop that consistency in my comparison. So we said, if you, after this, if you can say A is preferable to C, that kind of consistency remains, that person is a rational person. So rationality requires the second criteria, which is that not only I can compare two things, but I can also compare more than two things. And in that complex criteria, I can compare things. And I'm not talking about in two different periods. I'm talking about same period. It's like a child. You give a child, and let me, oh, sorry, I didn't present. Sorry, let me show you the board I was using. I was switching. So I was showing this board. So this is what I was talking about, that I have A, B, and C, and I'm saying A is better than B, B is better than C. But in the end, I should be also able to talk about, and I said, look, A is bigger than C. If I have that ability, that basically means that I have been able to complex comparison. I'm giving you three examples, this could be many. But if I don't have that ability, that means I have a problem of rationality. So this kind of a logic that I'm talking about, it is an important requirement that if I say this, and if I say this, in other words, these two are very close to each other. The moment I put these two, I don't have the rational reasoning behind it. Best example, probably, if you think about giving a two choice to a child, two toys, one car, one doll, and he or she decided to take the car. If you or decided to keep the car, and then there is a problem of comparison because the moment you have a doll and a chair, I said no, I should have taken that one. So that confusion makes you irrational. So remember, the idea of rationality is not just one choice. The idea of rationality is also making many choices, and you remain consistent of that. So take an example of COVID is a good example. Should you wear the mask or not? What do you think?
Yes, we should.
Yes, sir.
You should. But then the research says the no mask is not useful. For example, remember at the beginning they said only those people who are affected should wear the mask. Now they are saying everybody should wear the mask. You realize that your rationality is changing. Now at a particular point of time, it is much easier. But on a different period of time, things around us change. That's why you see many people talk about irrational human being. There is a whole school of thought. They say, no, human beings cannot be rational because we do not have enough information. Our information set is so small, even though we are rational now, but the moment I change the information, it is irrational. And this is the puzzle. These are the research puzzle that people are having. So I'm giving you your rationality completely changes with information.
Please subscribe to this channel to receive updates on new videos.